So the other day, after the requisite 30-minute negotiation that's involved with getting my 4-year-old to wear clothes of any kind, we were finally on our way to his preschool. And there's a house not too far from the school that really has these amazing seasonal outdoor decorations for really every holiday. Like for Halloween, they had full-size skeletons sitting in Adirondack chairs with hats on, with drinks in their hand. They really go all out. And so it turns out that just this past week, they pulled out all the Christmas decorations, and they have these really lovely angels, sort of made out of twigs, very sort of rustic chic, spray painted with white, with these big gold horns made out of the same thing, and a nativity, and it's really lovely. So as we're driving by, I just offhand said to my son Oliver, I said, look at the angels. And he said, Mommy, what's an angel? And maybe that shows a bit of the hole that we've been, perhaps my wife and I have a hole in the Christmas story we've been telling, that he doesn't know what an angel is. But I attempted to answer this question in about 30 seconds or less on the way to school drop-off, and I found myself saying this. Oh, an angel is a being that visits Earth sometimes. It's not a person, but it's also not an animal. Yeah, I'm hearing nothing from the back seat. Then a few seconds later, I hear, is it an insect? No, that's not it. Well, what is it, Mommy? Well, an angel is something that's sometimes in our Bible stories. Well, in the stories, they live in heaven and they visit earth, and they may look like people, but they aren't people. And then again, eyes getting bigger, nothing being said. And I say, oh, but you don't need to be afraid of them. It's really okay. And he says, but why? Why don't I need to be afraid of these angels? Well, because in our stories, they come to bring messages. They come to help us. They come to give us a message from God. Well, this did not exactly help him in that moment. His eyes just got bigger and bigger, that there are these messengers from God as I shoot him into the school. He was, in that moment, quite simply perplexed and pondering the meaning of my words. I also walked back to my car, pondering the meaning of my words to a 4-year-old, and thinking, well, this is the occupational hazard of being both a minister and a parent, thinking I could have perhaps said something less grand about angels. But in this moment, walking back to my car, I also reflected on the quiet joy in connection with my son, and that we will probably laugh about this for years to come. When the angel Gabriel did indeed come to Mary, his first words were, "Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you." And she too was much perplexed by his words and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. Now, I always find it funny that what perplexes Mary are Gabriel's words, a little bit less than perhaps Gabriel himself. But Gabriel follows it up with the thing that angels always say, which is, don't be afraid. And those are the words that Mary would need. Don't be afraid. Not necessarily of him, but of his message, once that message was fully downloaded. Because this was one of those situations where the news of her pregnancy wasn't exactly good news for her. Even if this was God's child, not everyone was going to see it that way. Who knows what Joseph would do, or her parents? In this culture at this time, at worst, she could have been stoned. At best, she would be shunned and poor and have no way to feed herself or her child. So maybe it was good news in theory, but in reality? Mary then travels 80 miles on foot, newly pregnant, on tough Judean countryside roads, to see Elizabeth. There she is, hoping for a place of rest and refuge with her cousin. And I imagine Elizabeth's husband, Zachariah, there, just taking it all in, unable to speak, because he had been muted by the same angel that came to visit Mary. I can see him there as kind of this witness to these two women who in this moment take center stage. And Mary sings the song that is in her bones from of old, and it's the song of power and revolution and truth. But Mary took a chance, because what Elizabeth could have cursed, she didn't know what she was going to find when she saw her cousin. What Elizabeth could have cursed, she instead blessed. What could have been the moment of the greatest fear and the greatest hopelessness was instead the moment of the great reversal. And that's our whole story. The thematic summary of it all, the great reversal of the powers that God is always doing. It is the theme of the Old Testament, and it is the heart of the gospel of Jesus Christ, beginning with this moment. This moment when two Jewish women, neither of whom have any reasonable reason to be pregnant, are sheltering one another in home and in heart, and are joyfully and defiantly singing in the face of all odds that are against them. This is joy at its finest. It's the kind of joy that raises its voice, however broken or tired or shaky, right in the midst of the rubble. It's the Who's down in Whoville. It's the protest songs of the civil rights movement. It's the characters of the Broadway show Rent, suffering from AIDS, jumping up on a restaurant table and singing La Vie Bohème. It is the many, many moments when instead of spirits being crushed, spirits rise. And this is this powerful, defiant joy. Brené Brown, a social worker and teacher and speaker, defines joy as being the positive attitude that comes from feeling connected to yourself. Now, the very definition of virgin in the ancient world means a woman who belongs to herself, meaning she is no one's property other than her own. Now, Mary is just that. She's not exactly meek and mild and demure. She is a woman who belongs to and is very deeply connected to herself. So much so that she's willing to take this huge risk here in being honest with Elizabeth. She is being really vulnerable. Now, connection to self is something that helps us find or receive joy, and so is vulnerability. We have to be connected to ourselves and also live with an open heart rather than in a posture of sort of being shut down or being protected. We, like Mary, have to say yes to what is happening in our lives when there's nothing we can do about it, rather than fight it. I sort of see this as a two-handed prayer practice that I call the yes and the thank you. And it goes a little bit like this. Just the prayer of yes. This is what is happening. I cannot change it. I cannot control it. I will no longer fight it. And then thank you. Because though I do not see it now, I trust, oh God, that you will bring something fruitful and something new, that you will birth something from this that might not have come any other way. And that is what we see with Mary. To do this, we have to have at least a little bit of curiosity. Like, I may not see it now, but I'm curious. I'm just curious what will come. What new shoots will birth forth from what seemed like fallow ground. Now, Mary was perplexed, confused by Gabriel's words, but she was also very curious about what this news meant. When Mary said, "How can this be?" this was not an expression of doubt. It was an expression of wonder and curiosity. Children are always curious. And this is the simple joy that I found that day, walking back to the car after my conversation with my son. Children bring joy because they are always vulnerable. They are always able to be themselves and see the world with wonder and curiosity. They teach us about joy. And we know that joy and happiness are not the same thing. They're two very different things. Joy is deeper than happiness, and it transcends circumstance. We can be unhappy about something, but still find joy in the sunset and the sunrise. Joy is also different from happiness in terms of agency. We cannot manufacture joy. We cannot go out and find it. We can only let it in the midst of our everyday lives, much like Mary surrendered to the truth of her pregnancy, so we have the opportunity to give into joy. When it shows up, say yes. When it knocks on the door, open the door. When it begins to rise from the ashes, clear out of the way and make room for it. And friends, nothing about joy is fake, and nothing about joy has anything to do with just being positive. Joy is about being real, vulnerable, connected to ourselves, living with openness to what each day, especially the most ordinary days, have for us. And it is not something that we have to ration or protect for fear that we won't have more, because giving into joy just begets more joy, because it opens more and more space in our hearts. Recently, I was emailing with one of our members who is in the midst of treatment for cancer, and it's been going on for a while. I know her days are long and that they're often uncomfortable. And in recent months, it's struck me that every email that she sends me ends with these words: find joy each day. It has stuck with me that in the midst of her own deep time of trial, she is letting herself be found by joy in the ways that she can, and she is reminding me that this is how joy works. So friends, where do you let yourselves be found by joy each day? For me, it's a very early morning cup of coffee before anyone else is awake, hopefully combined with a simple prayer to start the day. It's packing my kids' lunches and knowing just how they want their sandwiches cut. And I find joy in the theological questions that my kid often ask me, especially joy in the fact that they have no idea what a big question it is. I find perhaps a silly amount of joy sitting around the table in the conference room with our staff, hammering out the details of every single worship service, finding delight in our shared work and our shared laughter. I find joy setting up the altar for worship at the well, placing everything just so. I find joy in 1,000 other everyday things that are part of my life and my life at work and home. And in the past, in the most difficult times, in the deepest nights, it has been these very little tiny things that have saved me, that have opened up a tiny part of my heart amidst what was the tundra of fear and grief. Little shoots of life come from 1,000 tiny everyday things if we give in to even the tiniest drop of joy. And of course, joy is the most powerful when it is communal. When we as a community give into joy and let ourselves be vulnerable and curious, we are fueled in our own way to raise our own communal songs of determination and resilience and love and revolution. We hold in those moments the truth for one another that God even now is always about the great reversal, that God even now is turning the world upside down. We hold for each other the truth that the longest night always gives way to day, and that joy does indeed come in the morning. Amen.